Good evening, viewers. I'm Shaquita Thomas, and welcome to our second episode of Family Matters. This program comes to you under ChildLink's Recovery Safeguarding Reintegration Initiative. This program is spearheaded by ChildLinK and Child Care Protection Agency. This program is funded by the delegation of the European Union to Guyana. Tonight we will be discussing early childhood experiences. This evening, I have in studio with me two lovely young women who would have dedicated many years towards creating a safe Guyana for children. So I'll have them introduce themselves.
A pleasant good evening, viewers. My name is Stacey Paris, and I am a child care counselor, and I'm also the parenting skills educator at ChildLinK.
Good evening. My name is Zuleika Williams, and I'm a registration licensing officer attached to the Early Childhood Services Unit of the Child Care and Protection Agency, responsible for all the early childhood centers within the Region 3 district. Thank you for having me.
Okay, then. So, like I mentioned earlier, tonight we will be discussing early childhood experiences. So, can you guys share with us what is early childhood experiences and maybe, share some of your experiences for us?
Sure. So for me, all early childhood experiences, it refers to all of those experiences, those encounters, those interactions, our socialization, our development, our training that we would have accumulated throughout our childhood. And we know these experiences, they can either be negative or they can be positive. Whether negative or positive, they usually have a very lasting impact on the child. They also affect the child when he or she turns an adult as well. These experiences, they're also predominantly shaped by our family, which means that the way that we are parented or cared for will affect who we are in our childhood and also who we are or who we become as adults, and also the quality of parents or caregivers that we also will become to children in our adulthood. I'll just share a bit about my childhood experience. I come from a very big family, nuclear family, but also big, and I am one of the few Guyanese, I would say, who can safely say that I would have had a wonderful childhood. The reason why I say this is because I felt a sense of love and belonging in my family. I felt, most of what our parents or my parents would have taught me, it was done more so by modeling positive behaviors. For example, learning for me and education was something that was very easy and smooth for me. My mother played a very major part in my education, and the way she did it, it was so subtle. There was never a fear in terms of learning. My parents, I can recall as early as me being in nursery school, they always read in the afternoons. And so they were always with books. And that kind of pushed me or motivated me to read. So as small as I was there, sometimes I have a book that I don't even know what, understand the words, but I just want to imitate what they're doing. And that has really helped me to develop a love for education, a love for reading, which I have now taken into my adulthood. Also, one of the things that my mother in particularly would have done with us, she encouraged us to play as children. And we know that play for children is very important. It's important because they're children and they should be given playtime. But one of the things that I commend her for, play for us was never just, oh, maybe a parent's gone to sleep and you gone into the yard and play. It was always supervised. And that is one of the things that I also say to parents now. It's important that you ensure that when your children are playing, it's supervised. If it is that they're in the yard, maybe from time to time, periodically, you keep an eye on them. If it is that they're going over to a neighbor, friend, or relative's house or so on, maybe for a play date or whatever, you know who are the responsible adults that will be there. You check in maybe with a phone call to say, well, okay, just to check in to make sure everything is going okay, and then maybe to say, well, it's time for you to come home. So it has to be supervised. So I can recall in my early childhood, my mom might be in the kitchen cooking, and me and my siblings, we're probably in the dining room or the living room, and we're playing, and she encouraged us to play because sometimes we're playing with our little pots and plates, and we're playing cooking or whatever, and she would make these little bread. She would bake these little bread that would fit in our little plates or in our little pots. So she encouraged us to play. just as she encouraged us to study, but it was never done with fear. And so those are some of the positive things from my childhood that I have now taken into my adulthood. And those are the things that I usually, want to afford other children with. So the positives from my childhood is what I think, and from anybody's childhood is what I think we need to take, and also ensure that the children that we have care or responsibility over, that they're able to have those same experiences as well. So that is just a little about my childhood experience.
Okay. For those who don't know what early childhood development is, understand that early childhood development speaks to the most rapid period of a human being's life. It begins from conception to 8 years old. So we're talking about the development, the cognitive, social, and physical development of a child's life. And that developmental stages need to be nurtured in a conducive environment. You asked me about my childhood experiences. It was very much fun. I grew in an extended family with aunts and uncles and grandparents. I think most persons can relate living in a home with a large family setting. And we had a big guinea tree in the yard. So I was about 6 years old and my brother was 7, going in 8. And we always tried to pick the guineas before they ripe. So we would pick it and eat it with salt. So we got banned. You can't pick the guineas. When nobody was looking, my brother would climb the tree and I would stand under the tree with my hands open this wide, my little hands, waiting to catch the guineas. And he threw them down and I tried to get, oh, for the life of me, it just wouldn't stay in my hands, right? So the guineas would fall to the ground and I have to pick them up one by one. Little did I know that I was actually building the small motor muscles in my hands whilst doing that. So I visit childcare facilities every day and I would encourage them to help the children with the developmental stages. We're talking about the small and large motor muscles. And we talk about Play-Doh, we talk about building blocks, so we talk about having them using these balls and these fancy things. But back in our days, we didn't have that. So when I thought of some of the activities that I did then, that helped me to develop into the woman that I am now, because we know that our earliest experiences will shape the adult that we become later on in life. So that's important for persons, for parents, and even family members to understand. So when I think about it back then, I'm thinking, well, you really don't need all of those things. So I go to my childcare facilities and I said, listen, if you can't afford Play-Doh, let them play with a ball. Get some green cherries and let them sort it from some rice or something, because there's activities that children can be engaged in that is cost-free, that also can help with their developmental stages.
I like the fact that you mentioned that you grew up in an extended family, and I can tell you that I have 36 cousins, and when we all get together, those were some of the best times when you're all at granny, and you learn. Thinking back, you will now see that you would have learned so much that you're now applying to adulthood, and it's amazing how influential family is and how impacting our family can be on our lives, the choices we make as adults, whether they're negative or positive choices. Now we can talk about the impact that the family may have on early childhood experiences and how children transition into adulthood based on the impact that family would have had on them.
All right, so I would like to look at the impact that the family may have, and I want to focus a bit more on traumatic experiences that children may encounter in families during their childhood, and how these experiences can greatly impact or affect them in their adulthood. And we know that in families, there are many experiences that children might encounter that we can deem traumatic. So there are things like natural disasters, which can be a flood, a hurricane. Those can be traumatic for a child. Sometimes I think we kind of bypass those things. A fire, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a parent, separation from family from your loved ones. Being placed in an institution or a children's home can be traumatic for children. Child abuse is very traumatic for a child. When we're looking at child abuse, we're looking at physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and child neglect. All those are traumatic experiences. Domestic violence or domestic abuse, just simply witness it in the home, being a witness to domestic abuse in the home is a very traumatic thing for a child. One of the things that I always say to my parents is that when children, let's say our boy children, are systematically being, witnessing domestic abuse, they're living in a home plagued by domestic abuse, it can send a negative message to that boy child. That boy child will not remain the boy. He's going to grow into a man, and he might take into his very adult relationship those same traits or those same trend of being violent towards his partner, because that was what he was learned, that was what was modeled to him, that was what it was brought up in his training, and so he can very well take that into his adulthood. A girl child also being in a home and being the witness of domestic abuse, it can send a message to her, that this is normal. This is normal. This is what happens. My husband is supposed to beat me. My partner is supposed to beat me. He's supposed to abuse me. I would have seen my mother and my father went through this, and she stayed, and she took it, and she took it in silence, and so I have to stay here. I have to take it. And so you can find girl children can grow up having very low self-esteem, not being assertive, and they're no longer girl children, they're women. So they're no self-esteem, not being assertive, and also find themselves in an abusive relationship. However, with everything where there's a negative, there's also a positive or a flip side that can come out of. So that same boy child who would have been witnessing abuse, domestic violence, perhaps, might now grow up and have his own family and say, you know what? I don't want this sort of relationship between me and my wife. I don't want this sort of relationship between me and my partner. I don't want my children to witness this because I know how damaging it was for me. It might also, act as it can also help the girl child to say, well, I don't want X, Y, or Z partner. I don't want this kind of partner. And if I see certain warning signs come up, this is not a relationship for me. So it can propel them to do better than what their parents would have done. So there can be a negative, and there's also, in some cases, there could be a positive as well.
Allow me to add. When we talk about family and early childhood experiences, the family play a vital role where that is concerned. And we all have to understand that children are born into a family. We're all born into a family. Father side family, mother side family. We're all born into different types of families. And the family helps to mold the child from the youngest age up until age. We're talking early childhood. So the family has a moral obligation to ensure that the early childhood stages are nurtured in a conducive environment so that we could get a child who's an empowered adult, who grows to be an adult, who is confident, high self-esteem, who can make informed decisions, right? So even pregnant women, mothers, and potential mothers, you may be living in an extended family. It's important for aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters in that home to understand the role that they have to play in that child's life. Because having a baby in the house is different from living in a house with adults.
Yes.
Right? So we got to watch what we say.
Yes.
We have to watch what we do. We have to watch the things that we look at on television when the child is present. So the whole atmosphere of the home changes. And I think society today, most family members don't want to adjust to that change. It's your child in the room, I'm going to stay in the room. I can watch me wherever I watch, on television.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk what I want to talk on my phone. It's my phone. Baby is just a baby. Baby don't understand nothing. People think that babies really don't understand. But people have to understand that every stage a child goes through is for a reason. It's not because they're picking up papers and putting in their mouth for a reason. They're learning texture, taste. What is this? Oh, this is not for my mouth. This is hard. They put it down, move on to something else. They're not doing that because they're stupid. There's a reason for them to do that. It's a part of their developmental stage. So the family need to get on board. The family need to understand what their responsibility and obligations are towards the developmental stage of that child, and know that the experiences that child gain from that family circle will shape the individual that they become.
Yes, and let me add that based on what you're saying, it's when you know as Guyanese parents, when your child might come home to say, "Mommy, I had an exam and I got a C." Now parents would be like, "You could have done better. Um, you're stupid. What's the matter with you? You don't pay attention in class." However, when you could have, just switched it up a bit and said, "Listen, we all fall short sometimes in life, and I know you have the potential to do better. I don't know what it is that might have caused you to, fail or gain a low grade, but I know you can do better." So I can remember growing up, my mother would always say things like, "You're beautiful, you're pretty," or even things like, "You are smart, I see so much potential in you." And even as an adult, we all come to a place where we might doubt ourselves sometimes. I would look at myself in the mirror, my mother would do it too, and I would say, "Listen, you can do this. You have to do this." And that I can safely say was based on early childhood experiences that I had with my mother, of her empowering me. So it is important for parents to realize that what we say to children, the things we do around our children, will directly influence the way they think of themselves and the way they perceive the world, and also the way they view others. And building off of what you mentioned earlier about growing up in a home with domestic violence, we know in our Guyanese society, licks is very prevalent. Our parents say that I grew up on licks and I didn't die, so my child wouldn't die. However, what we fail to realize is that we're teaching children to resolve conflict with violence. So if you do something wrong, I have to beat you because it is wrong. I'm not going to sit and talk to you. I have to beat you. So our children can grow up thinking that, you know what, if this boy hit me, or if this girl hit me, or they do something wrong, then we have to fight to get to neutral grounds. We have to fight to resolve whatever it is. So as parents, we need to take into consideration all of these things when we're raising young children. I mean, I'm not a mother as yet, but I would always look at my mother parenting, my parents' parenting skills, and I would try to gain something from them. I'm not saying they're perfect, but I'm saying that if I notice that they're doing something that I don't like, I would try to say, you know what, this is something that I wouldn't try with my child. And for parents with young adult children and teenagers, they need to really take into consideration that when you're raising your teenager, your child, you're also raising your grandchild, because you're teaching your children how to parent, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the key elements of early childhood experiences.
Okay, great. So for me, the most important or the key element of early childhood experience is family. So we know that children thrive and they develop well when they're in a family setting. But being in a family alone is not sufficient. Children, it's important that our children grow up in families that shows them love and affection. It's important for them to be in families that have a sense, that they feel a sense of belonging to. Children need to feel as if they're a part of this family, and so their voices and their opinions matter. It's important for them also to be in a family where there's alternative methods of discipline. There are other ways of dealing with misbehaviors or whatever it is, other than just picking up a belt. I always say that in Guyana here, our recipe to deal with all of children's behavior is licks.
Yes.
Right? So it's important for us to have alternative or positive methods of discipline and correcting behaviors rather than punishing children's behavior. Because sometimes if we get to the underlying issues, it's way more than what has been presented. So it's also important for families to act as a positive role model for children. One of the things that it's imperative is that children learn based on what they see and not so much what they hear, especially in their early childhood. And so they're looking at their parents, they're looking at the adults that surround them, and they're observing, and they basically do what they're doing, and they model those behaviors. It's important for children to grow up in families that are free from violence and harm. It's important. So we know it's important for children to be in families, but it needs to include all of these elements. It needs to be a family that provides safety and security for that child. There should be open communication between parents, between the adults in the home and the child. And one of the things we always say is that it's not for parents to be talking at their children, but you talk to them. And so there's a lot of talking as a parent. It's talk and talk and talk rather than beat and beat and beat. But equal to the talk and talk and talk, it's a lot of listening as well. And so for communication, it's talking and it's listening. So you need to allow that child to express their views and their opinion. It should be a family that aids in building the child's self-esteem. I've seen a lot of adults who have low self-esteem, who aren't assertive. And I think that that needs to be built in your childhood. So you need to teach children responsibilities and give them leadership roles as well, to build their self-esteem. A family that educates, it's important to be in a family that educates. And education is not just the formal education in terms of learning maths, English, science, social studies. It's educating children about various social issues. For example, in terms of sexual abuse, educating them about their various body parts, educating them in terms of how to protect themselves, and always letting them know that they can always come to you and who are the other responsible persons that they can go to and they can share and they can relate. So education is key. It's also having children, ensuring that children, they aren't fearful of the adults in the family. One of the things that I've encountered in my work with parents is that most of the time children don't approach their parents, they don't go to their parents, and they don't share with them what are some of the ugliest things that might be happening in their childhood, just simply because of fear. For example, studies would have revealed, let's look at sexual abuse. Studies would have revealed that sometimes children don't report to their parents, cases of sexual abuse or sexual violation, just simply because they're fearful of being blamed. They're fearful of getting licks or being punished or further victimized by their parents or the adults who are supposed to provide care or have responsibility over them. So it's important that you parent your children with love and affection, and they aren't fearful of you.
Yes, family indeed. Family, play also is a key element. Play is very important. And if I didn't mention play, then I would not be a licensed registration officer. Right? Play, because children learn through play. They learn socialization skills through play. They learn to interact through play. They learn conflict resolution through play. And I remember I was at a workshop one time, and there were some children there. They were playing, and one of the child said, "It's me, on." "No, it's me. We were fighting over a toy. It's me." "All right, you use it now, right? And you give it back to me just now, right?" So they resolve their own conflict there without any adult intervention. So play is also a key element. We talked extensively about the family. I will talk about nurturing your child, ensuring that they eat foods that are healthy for them, that can help with their cognitive ability. Their developmental stage is very important. I know I want to touch a little bit on parenting. Whenever I'm in a meeting with parents, at a PTA meeting, or having any sort of conferencing with parents, I would tell them the way we were parented is not necessarily the way we parent our children. That doesn't mean because you were parented a certain way that that's the correct way to parent your children. So that's what I want to encourage parents to do, just to examine your parenting skills, read to your children more, because reading is very important, encourage play, nurturing, and just keep your children in a safe and secure environment. Love your children.
Yes, it is important to not only parents but also communities. You know, there's an old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So, as community members, what you say to children, that there's little Johnny, he dance. You know, we say these things to children. You need to be very careful and make sure that your words are uplifting to children. Okay, so that would have brought us to the end of our discussion. I want to thank you ladies so much for coming and speaking about early childhood experiences with me tonight. I want to thank the viewers for watching, and I encourage you to tune in on Monday the 29th of October as we continue our discussion. Until next time, I'm your host, Shaquita Thomas.
Miss Ross had returned home with a woman who told us that she was from the Child Protection Agency. She told us that she cared about us and we needed to be taken care of properly. She said that she was going to take us to a place called the orphanage, where we can have a much better care. I wasn't sure what to do because I've never seen this woman before and wanted to know if she can come and take me and my brother away. Then Miss Ross spoke to us and told my brother and me that we are going to a much better place than home, where we will be well taken care of and she will come to visit us. My little brother asked what will happen to our mother. Will we be seeing our mother again? The woman said yes, our mother can come to visit us. She said that everything will be alright. She told us to pack our bags as we are leaving today. I was sad. I didn't want to go away from the only place I had known as home, but I remembered Miss Ross saying it's just a short stay, so I just packed a few clothing for my brother and I left the rest at home. We're ready to go, I told the woman, with only one plastic bag filled with clothes for my brother and I. As we were about to leave, we hugged and kissed Miss Ross goodbye. As we left, a special bus was waiting for us that day. I felt glad to know we weren't walking since I didn't feel like doing much walking that day. The ride was long, so we fell asleep. When the bus stopped, we were awakened by the child counselor who told us that we had reached. So we came off the bus and we went to a wooden structure that can be seen on the outside. When we came inside the building, I saw many children there. We were taken to a lady in the office who welcomed us, another woman who directed us where to place our things. The place was so noisy as the children were playing games with each other, running in the building and talking loudly as they watched television. My brother and I went to a room for boys only which had many bunk beds. We were given a bunk bed to sleep. I chose to sleep on the upper bed than the lower bed because my brother often rolls in his sleep, and I didn't want him to have a heart fall if he rolled off the bed. The children there stared at us a lot at the orphanage. Almost everyone just passed us without saying a word, except for one girl. She told us that her name was Jarvo. She is 19 years old and is living with her 5-year-old daughter in the orphanage. She has been living in the orphanage since she was 12 years old. She told us that she was raped by a relative and became pregnant. Her daughter Oskana is now 6 years old and doesn't know any of her relatives. I asked Jarva why she's not living back home with her family. She told me that the court case is still going on and the relative is still living in the home. Tears came to Jarva's eyes as she kept saying she wants to see her family and she doesn't want her daughter to grow up in this orphanage. She wants a normal life for her and her child. It was the sound of a bell. and Jarva told us it was time for us to have dinner. At dinner, we had to line up for our food with our plate in our hands. We were served dinner by a cook in the dining area. We had black eye cook up with fried chicken. I was happy to eat since my mother hardly cooked for my brother and me. The food tastes delicious. I ate every grain of rice, but not my brother, who ate half of his food. I didn't want him to waste it, so I helped him finish his food. After our dinner, we were allowed to
It's
watch
not you to put in
television
this fucking
until
expression
8
for this
p.m.
dog.
and wash up, brush our teeth, and then we had to go to bed. The girls went to sleep in another section from the boys. I had to share the room with many other boys. I felt strange sleeping in the room with all the other boys. Since I missed my own room and bed, I just kept remembering that this is a
I
short
wish I
stay
could
and
go
I
to
will
the
be home
family.
soon. The next morning, we were awakened very early out of bed to start our morning as the boys took turns to shower, and then we lined up again to be served our breakfast. It was a Thursday morning, so some of the children were preparing to leave for school, but I was told that my brother and I will not be attending school until next week. So we decided to walk around the orphanage trying to make new friends. In the corner looking out the window, we saw a boy about 8 years old in a wheelchair. He looked very sad that morning as he was gazing outside. I wanted to go talk to him, but my brother was scared, so I went by myself. I introduced myself and he told me that his name was James. I had asked him why he was not going to school like the other boys. And I felt so bad when he said that he came to the orphanage since he was a 5 months old baby. His mother had left him at an early age and he doesn't know any of his family, only the people in the orphanage who takes care of him. He says he cannot walk and one of his hands is longer than the other, with the shorter hand only having 3 fingers and the other hand only having 2 fingers. He's never been to school and is mostly in the orphanage. I felt sad to hear about his story, but never going to school was hard for me to imagine. He will never know how much fun school is. I began to wonder if I will be in this orphanage as long as these other children.